When did she last see grain or rice?
আচ্ছা আপনি কয়দিন আগে ভাত খেয়েছেন?
ভাত রোজার গেছে যে রোজার পরে 30 টাকা দিয়ে জুতাম জানতাম মাগিয়ে দিয়া
রোজা কয় মাস হবে এটা? It's 3 months she did not see a single plate of rice. She's just surviving on the gruel from flour.
Tell me something. How do people living so poorly and eating so badly, not eating at all, how do they survive?
Government relief. আপনি রিলিফ পাইছেন?
না
Relief.
দিছে না বাজি বড় বাচ্চা খাইয়ে লিছে
She did not get any relief, and she said that all this relief are misappropriated by the big shots of the local administration. So I did not get it. That is her complaint.
Prime Minister, we have seen in villages situations which show no food at all. People have come up to us and said, we are eating leaves, we are starving, we have no food, we're not getting it from anywhere. Quite close to Dhaka. Why should this be so?
You see, that is some of the places this happens, but we have our open, free kitchen everywhere. People are welcome to come there. And they have come. We have our camps, still we have not closed our camps. Of course we have not closed the camps. The people have started working in the fields now. But of course this trouble is there. It's such a serious flood and serious famine. We have not suppressed the news. We have already declared in the parliament that around 27,000 people have died by starvation and by disease. We have not hid anything from anybody. It's a fact, natural calamities.
It seemed much worse than I expected in August. I've seen outside relief camps people being turned away because the camps are full. Granted that you have set up these grill kitchens, but it seems that many people, perhaps tens of thousands of people, are simply not getting food in this country.
It's not correct. It's not correct.
That's his son. When did he die? Just today?
আজকে মারা গেছে আজকে রাত্রে মারা গেছে লাস্ট নাইট
How old was he?
বয়স কত ছিল বয়স 3 মাস 3 months
Because I believe that possibly the greatest famine in recorded history has now begun here, with tens of thousands of people already dead and dying and suffering. I also believe that Bangladesh could become the world's most ignored tragedy, because Mr. Kissinger and Mr. Brezhnev have now agreed on a world...
Today is an average day in the streets of Dhaka, now the most desperate of cities. More desperate, I'm told, than even Calcutta and Shanghai in the 30s. In normal times, this lorry collects the bodies of a few dozen destitutes. Now it collects hundreds of bodies, all of them starved to death, including this 11-year-old girl whose name was Hasna, who died in the gutter a few hours before we arrived, with her mother and brother beside her, still with nothing to eat.
If you go early in the morning, you'll find bodies lying around in the streets of Dhaka. And the other day I saw a mother who had lost her child, and she was using the child's body, in fact, as a means of getting money, begging.
So this film will go out on January the 2nd. How much worse will the situation be here in Bangladesh?
Starvation cases could only get worse.
Why have these children been allowed to starve? Why have they not been saved? The answer is not what you have often been told, that Bangladesh is so corrupt it is beyond redemption. For some of us who came here at the birth of this country, reporters, foreign aid officials, political do-gooders, Bangladesh was no more than a brief cynical romance, a source of good copy. And now the story and the cause are stale, the problem too great, the tragedy unfashionable. These people are starving to death because 2 crops were ruined by flood and because of certain major political decisions taken outside Bangladesh. We were too concerned with oil to notice that in 1974 food became a political weapon, a more lethal weapon than oil. We can do without oil, we cannot do without food. The United States Secretary of State, Dr. Henry Kissinger, controls the distribution of all American surplus food abroad. Not one country on his priority list is hungry. All are Dr. Kissinger's client states. All comply with his world strategy in return for favors such as food. At the top of the priority list are Chile, Cambodia, South Korea, and South Vietnam. South Vietnam, which gets more American food than any other country, not only exports its own rice, but openly sells America's food to buy arms in order to continue a war on America's behalf. Bangladesh is not on Dr. Kissinger's priority list.
Dr. Rutten, would you ask him if most of the people who are buried in the cemetery die of starvation?
এই যে গোরস্থানে যারা মারা যাচ্ছে তাদের মধ্যে বেশিরভাগ লোকই কি না খেয়ে মারা যাচ্ছে? অনাহার। সে বলছে যে he says that most of the cases, death cases are from starvation.
On December the 8th, 1974, a secret report by the US State Department was leaked in Washington. It gave examples and details of the use of food as a means of shoring up one regime and blackmailing another. It quoted a top official whose job is to carry out Dr. Kissinger's strategic policies. He said, "To give food aid to countries just because they are starving is a pretty weak reason."
Blood. Yes. When you say famine is there, that means there's no food in the village at all, is that right?
No food is there.
What is she saying about her little boy?
She says that her baby is suffering from disease, and it is due to food, shortage of food.
Excuse me, is this the first food they're getting since they've arrived? This is the first food. Well, the first food in weeks, is it? Or?
The Soviet Union, with the biggest air force in the world, has lent Bangladesh 9 creaking helicopters, which break down more than they fly. The world's new rich, the oil producers, have offered some petty cash. Saudi Arabia, for example, recently gave Bangladesh the equivalent of less than 5 days' food. But of course the oil countries don't like dealing with bankrupt economies, even though rising oil prices have helped to cause this famine by putting petroleum-based fertilizers out of the reach of poor countries. Which means that this starving child, the son of a farmer, will probably die. Recently, a foreign aid official visited Bangladesh for 3 days. He told me about a cable he sent to his government recommending a reduction in emergency relief aid to Bangladesh. He sent the cable on the basis of 1 helicopter trip. He said, "The trouble with these people is that they have no get up and go, no success motivation." The judgment of this official is shared by other foreign diplomats here, who justify their ability to sit and watch people die by talking incessantly about local corruption, which of course exists, as the starving old woman in the village said. But need I say that this corruption is the universal symptom of a society caught in a never-ending cycle of poverty, war, catastrophe, and a scarcity of everything that is taken for granted in the West, like fresh water, and milk powder, and doctors, and blankets, and edible food. Is this corruption, or is the real corruption the world's culpable neglect of this ravaged country?
Could you ask her how old her little boy is?
আপনার বাচ্চার বয়স কত? 3 years.
He's 3. He's extremely ill, isn't he?
বাচ্চার কি হয়েছিল?
ডাক্তার জ্বর আর আড়া করছে
He says that he's a bad stomach and then he had fever also.
She's come here to Dhaka to get food. Yes. Will he survive?
I think so.
There are just 75 hospital beds for children in all of Bangladesh. That works out at 1 bed per million of population. None of the sick and starving children in this camp will ever see a hospital.
This used to be a soap factory. It is now a famine relief centre near Dhaka, and several thousand people are here. Almost all of them are starving, and many of the young children are suffering from typhoid, smallpox and a thing called black fever. Many of them are dying. Not long ago, Dr. Henry Kissinger made his first visit to Bangladesh, squeezing it in between the Middle East and Moscow. He drove straight from the airport to the Intercontinental Hotel, talked for 1 hour with the Prime Minister, returned to the Intercontinental Hotel, held a press conference, drove back to the airport and left. Shortly after that, President Ford, on Dr. Kissinger's recommendation, halved the proposal for American emergency aid to Bangladesh. Instead, Bangladesh will receive more of the same from America. Boxes of army surplus biscuits and consignments of tents on which is written, "Important campers, don't forget to have fun."
On December the 28th, 1974, Sheikh Mujib declared a state of emergency in Bangladesh. There were shootings, arrests, and signs that Bangladesh is fast approaching political chaos as a direct result of this famine. Of course, it used to be said that starving people disturb nobody, and this certainly applies to the thousands of dead in this horrific cemetery. But Bangladesh is at the center of Asia, with borders on China, India, and Burma. And when those who somehow manage to survive this famine are finally in political turmoil, they will, I'm afraid, disturb everybody. The people of Bangladesh may then at last assume a strategic value and disturb even Dr. Kissinger. They may even disturb the United Nations, which ignores its own charter by its meanness to Bangladesh, and the Soviet Union, which heaps so-called friendship on Bangladesh and little else, and Australia, which mocks Asia with cliches about partnership while its surplus wheat stays in its silos, and the so-called internationalist common market, whose behaviour toward the starving of Bangladesh is that of a mean little burger, and Britain with its traditional goodwill and 2 idle helicopters. But of course the West has given something to Bangladesh.
Army surplus biscuits and consignments of tents on which is written, "Important campers, don't forget to have fun."
On December the 28th, 1974, Sheikh Mujib declared a state of emergency in Bangladesh. There were shootings, arrests, and signs that Bangladesh is fast approaching political chaos as a direct result of this famine. Of course, it used to be said that starving people disturb nobody, and this certainly applies to the thousands of dead in this horrific cemetery. But Bangladesh is at the center of Asia, with borders on China, India, and Burma. And when those who somehow manage to survive this famine are finally in political turmoil, they will, I'm afraid, disturb everybody. The people of Bangladesh may then at last assume a strategic value and disturb even Dr. Kissinger. They may even disturb the United Nations, which ignores its own charter by its meanness to Bangladesh, and the Soviet Union, which heaps so-called friendship on Bangladesh and little else, and Australia, which mocks Asia with cliches about partnership while its surplus wheat stays in its silos, and the so-called internationalist common market, whose behaviour toward the starving of Bangladesh is that of a mean little burger, and
out of starvation. starvation.
6 million people died in concentration camps during 4 years in World War II. Almost as many people may have died in Bangladesh in the last 4 years. Years of drought, flood, epidemic, a genocidal war, and now famine, perhaps the greatest famine of all. I don't draw this parallel idly. I happen to be standing in the middle of a field piled high with human skeletons, bones and skulls and pieces of human hair for as far as I can see, now being picked over by crows. This is just one cemetery in Dhaka, and today they are digging up last month's famine victims in order to bury today's victims. 85 since 7 o'clock, 10,000 since last July, and most of them young, starved children. Many of these children died because they couldn't get milk, because I believe that possibly the greatest famine in recorded history has now begun here, with tens of thousands of people already dead and dying and suffering. I also believe that Bangladesh could become the world's most ignored tragedy, because Mr. Kissinger and Mr. Brezhnev have now agreed on a world doctrine in which a country like Bangladesh is expendable. It has no oil, it has no real strategic value, it has no military power, it has no practical purpose. All it has is people who now wish to live.